The rain came down in heavy, slanted sheets, drumming against the cracked sidewalks and splashing up from the road with every car that passed. It was the kind of night when most people hurried along with their heads down, shoulders hunched, desperate to escape the chill that seeped into their bones. James Daniels, 27 years old and exhausted after a double shift at the diner, was one of those people at first. His hoodie was soaked through, his sneakers squished with every step, and all he wanted was to collapse on his bed in his small apartment on the south side of town. But then he noticed her. She was standing at the edge of the street, clutching a thin paper bag against her chest as if it were her last possession in the world. The bag sagged from the rain, the corners softening, and James could just make out a carton of milk and a loaf of bread inside. She looked like she had stepped out into the storm unprepared, wearing only a worn beige coat that barely reached her knees. Her umbrella was flipped inside out, useless against the wind that whipped at her silver hair. She tried to right it with trembling hands, but her fingers slipped, and the umbrella clattered to the ground. James hesitated for half a second. Most people around him just walked on, eyes fixed on the pavement, pretending not to see. But something in the way the woman's shoulders slumped hit him deep. She wasn't just caught in the rain, she was struggling, vulnerable, alone. His mother's voice echoed in his head, "If you see someone in need, James, don't ever turn away. That's when your character speaks loudest." "Ma'am, let me help you," James called, jogging over. His breath came in white puffs as the cold cut through his soaked hoodie. He bent down, picked up the umbrella, and held out his arm. "Come on, let's get you across the street." The woman looked up at him, startled at first, her pale blue eyes glistening with rain. Then she gave a tiny nod, gripping his arm tightly as though it were the only thing keeping her standing. James guided her carefully, making sure her shoes didn't slip on the slick pavement. Cars roared by, splashing dirty water across their legs, but he kept himself between her and the street, shielding her as best he could. By the time they reached the bus stop shelter, the woman was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as if the short walk had drained her. James shrugged off his soaked jacket and draped it over her shoulders without thinking. "Young man," she whispered, clutching the jacket, "people don't stop to help anymore." "You didn't have to." James smiled, shaking the water from his hair. "Rain or shine, we look out for each other. That's how my mama raised me." For a moment, her frail hand lingered on his, her expression softening into something more than gratitude, something thoughtful, almost measuring. But James didn't notice. He simply gave her a reassuring nod as the bus pulled up, waved goodbye, and turned to continue his long walk home, unaware that this small act of kindness had just changed the course of his life. The morning sun rose clear and bright, as if the storm from the night before had been nothing more than a passing dream. But James hadn't slept much. He tossed and turned, staring at the cracks in the ceiling of his one-bedroom apartment, his mind circling the same thought over and over: this interview could change everything. James had been working at the diner for nearly 5 years. He was a reliable employee, the kind who covered extra shifts when others called out, but no matter how hard he worked, the pay was barely enough to cover rent and groceries. His mother, who lived just a few blocks away, relied on him too. She had health problems that kept her from working full-time, and James did everything he could to make sure she had food on the table and her medications. He wanted more than survival. He wanted stability, respect, and a future. That's why he had applied to Whitfield Logistics, one of the city's most reputable companies. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he studied his reflection with critical eyes. His only clean shirt was a little faded, the collar slightly worn, but it was neatly ironed. He paired it with his best trousers, polished his shoes until they shined, and practiced his answers in a low whisper. "Why do you want to work here? What makes you a good fit? What are your strengths?" Each time, his voice wavered with both hope and fear. When he finally stepped into the towering glass building downtown, he felt dwarfed by it. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and chrome fixtures, business professionals gliding past in sharp suits and confident strides. James clutched his folder of resumes like a lifeline, reminding himself to breathe. "Mr. Daniels," the receptionist called after a short wait. He stood quickly, wiped his damp palms on his trousers, and followed her down a corridor. His heart pounded harder with each step until they reached a sleek conference room. 3 people sat at a long table, folders spread before them. James tried to steady himself, offering a polite smile. Then his eyes landed on her. The elderly woman from the rain. But she wasn't the frail figure clutching a paper bag anymore. She was composed, powerful, dressed in a navy suit that radiated authority. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and there was a quiet confidence in her posture. James almost stumbled, disbelief washing over him. It can't be her. Her eyes met his instantly. A flicker of recognition lit her face, followed by the faintest smile. "Mr. Daniels," she said, her voice calm but warm. "I believe we've already met." The other executives glanced at her curiously, but James stood frozen, unsure whether to acknowledge it or not. His throat felt dry, his mind scrambled. He had come here prepared to prove himself to strangers, but now one of them already knew him, not from a resume, not from a reference, but from a rainy night when he had simply done what he thought was right. And only then did James realize, this was no ordinary interviewer. She was Margaret Whitfield, the founder and CEO of the very company he was desperate to join. James sat in the interview chair, his back straight but his heart pounding so hard he could almost hear it echo in the silence. He was sure his hands were trembling, so he folded them in his lap, pressing his fingers together to steady them. The executives shuffled through papers, scanning his resume with professional detachment, but it was Margaret Whitfield's eyes, calm, piercing, knowing, that made him feel exposed. She wasn't just evaluating his credentials. She was reading him like an open book. The first questions were expected. His work history, his time at the diner, whether he had ever managed people. James answered with honesty, even when he worried his responses might sound inadequate. "I haven't had a corporate role before," he admitted, "but I've been the one training new hires at the diner, juggling multiple responsibilities, and making sure we deliver service even on the busiest nights. It's not in an office, but it's leadership all the same." The younger executive scribbled notes while another nodded politely, but Margaret leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the table. Her voice broke the rhythm of routine. "Mr. Daniels, I'd like to ask you something different. Forget resumes and skills for a moment. Tell me, what's your purpose? What makes you get up each morning and fight through the hard days?" The room went still. James blinked, taken off guard. He swallowed, glanced down at his hands, and then slowly lifted his gaze. "My mom," he began, his voice low but steady. "She raised me on her own. Worked double shifts, cleaned houses, did whatever she had to so we could survive. And even when she was tired, she always told me, 'James, you be kind. You help people when you can. That's the real measure of a man.'" He paused, emotion thickening his throat. "What drives me is wanting to give her something better. A life where she doesn't have to struggle anymore. And to prove that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength. That's what I want to carry into any job I take." The words weren't rehearsed, but they carried the weight of truth. One executive leaned back, eyebrows raised in quiet approval. Another looked at Margaret, as if sensing this was more than an ordinary interview. Margaret smiled faintly, the corners of her eyes softening. "Mr. Daniels, yesterday, in the middle of a storm, I was a woman struggling on a street corner. My umbrella was broken, my hands were full, and people walked past me like I was invisible. Except one young man. He gave me his time, his jacket, and his kindness. That young man is sitting in front of me right now." Gasps and surprised glances flew across the table. James felt heat rush to his face. He hadn't expected her to reveal it. Margaret's tone sharpened, carrying authority. "We can train skills. We can teach systems, processes, logistics. But we cannot teach heart. We cannot teach compassion. And if this company is to thrive, we need leaders who know how to care about more than the bottom line. I've already seen who Mr. Daniels is when no one's watching." The executives exchanged looks, but there was little to debate. One cleared his throat. "I think that says it all." Margaret extended her hand toward James. "Congratulations, Mr. Daniels. Welcome to Whitfield Logistics." James froze for a heartbeat, overwhelmed, then shook her hand firmly. Relief surged through him, but more than that, it was validation. His mother's lessons, his choice to stop in the rain, his refusal to ignore someone in need, all of it had led here. Later that evening, as he walked home under a sky scrubbed clean by the storm, the air smelled of possibility. His clothes were still damp from the night before, but his spirit burned bright. For the first time in years, James didn't just believe in kindness, he had proof it could shape his destiny.